Hello everyone. I wanted to do a little review to kind of wrap up from gameplay experience, and I filmed, actually, this is kind of the aftermath of a game I got done filming, and I thought I would just kind of review the game overall for folks to give you an idea of a summarized. If you want to see gameplay by turns, and go back to the channel and you'll see a much more in-depth review of the rules, so this would be a nice short overview for folks. What I'm going to do is, first of all, just point out some of the components. There's also an unbagging video I did, but your game does come with 88 counters. You get some Marine units, you get the Colossi counters, and then you have some administrative markers. You also get some civilian markers. They're the miners that you might encounter, and they're double-sided with the miner side and a trap side. And the Marines, they're double-sided as well with their reduced side. And same with the creatures. They'll have a full strength side and a reduced side. Now the map you get is, I think what they said, like 12 by 17 inches or something like that. Not good with remembering all the stats there, but you get one map. It's double-sided. It has your terrain effects chart. It has your turn sequence chart. Then it has a compass for direction, which is important because there is sometimes you have to make random rolls to determine a direction that something goes. That's there. And then it's labeled if it's A or B, and there's a sequence of play. Now, to play the game, we'll just kind of explain it as going through the sequences. Now the map, well, the game itself is, the premise is that this rock planet, you've got miners and they've disturbed the planet, and then a lot of the boulders and rocks come to life, and then they call in help of the Marines, and they come in and they're going to fight the boulders and save the civilians essentially. So the sequence of play is you're going to start out by drawing an event, and we can look at that right here. You draw an event chit. So the game comes with about 14 of these event chips, and the scenario that you pick, one of the two, or you run a campaign, but it will tell you how to set up your event chits. So for example, with the first campaign, you pick, there's like two that you have to pick, and they're labeled red, and they say specifically it's for scenario 1. So you're going to put those two, and you can see the other red one like right down here, and then it says to pick 11 more events at random. So of your 14 events, you're going to be running in the first scenario, well, my math might be wrong, but you're going to pull like 11 of these chits in addition to those two, so that gives you like 13 chits for the first scenario. Now there's only 12 turns. One of these chits says if you pull it, you have to pull one more event. So basically they just want to make sure you have enough random events in here to cover all 12 turns. Alright, so you got these random events. So you draw one, and then it will tell you what the event is. So we actually have then honoring our ancestors. This is like the second time I've drawn that first, not even trying to. But when you draw one of those events, on your player aid card, it then actually has all the events listed for you. So that's another thing you get with the game. So you have your double-sided counters, you have your double-sided map, you also have this double-sided player aid. And on this side, it's all of the events that you can draw. And it will tell you how many of a particular one that you have. So the honoring our ancestors, which is right here, luckily there's only one. But then it gives you specifically the details of what occurs. So once you have solved your events, then you would move on to the Marines, which is Marine/civilians. And the first thing you check is recovery. Now, as the game progresses, you are going to end up with stunned or paralyzed units. And we'll talk about how that happens in combat. And then most drastically, you might get some that are reduced. So in the Marine recovery step, our chart then has some special rules on how they would recover. Now, just to show you here, there's a Marine recovery chart. So I'm going to roll a dice 6. So let's say I'm going for that, fix that stun unit. I just check my dice roll, compare it, and it says there's no effect. And then there's some dice roll modifiers, just in case you are adjacent to a Colossi, or there's even a bonus if you're next to a medic. So if you make your roll, you can either like remove the stunned, or you could flip a paralyzed to a stunned, or you can take this disrupted unit and fix it. So if you have a unit that's paralyzed and disrupted, and you succeed at your medical roll, you have to just decide, do I unparalyze it and make it stunned, or can I actually fix the disrupted and it would still be paralyzed? So you just have to decide, how do you want to heal that unit? You don't heal all the status effects at once. Whew, that's tough. All right, so that's the Marine recovery phase. Once that's done, you then do the Marine reinforcements. Now your scenario is actually going to have a chart that tells you what units are going to pop in on any given turn. So for example, here is the Marine chart for scenario 1. So on turn 1, I get the Scout, I get the Marine, and 4 Marine squads. So with that first scenario, all that's on the board is the setup for the Colossi, where they'll appear, and the civilian units. No Marines actually start on that particular map. Alright, so now I know that in my first turn, in that reinforcement phase, I get those 5 units. They don't just appear on the board. So the story says that they're in orbit, and then they have to drop land onto the planet. So that's pretty dramatic. But they have to roll to see how well they land. Now it's just a straight dice 6 roll, so you're going to pick a spot where they land, you roll your dice 6, and you check against the chart. And it's going to have modifiers if it's anti-gravity wave or if there's hurricane winds, and that will determine if they land close to the area or in their area. And if they have a good successful landing, they can fight, or if they get blown off course, they could end up on the other side of the map or in an adjacent hex, but then they're done for that turn. So there's a chance when they first land that everything goes well and you can start doing actions with them. Now, once they're on the board, you then move on to doing Marine actions, which could be attacking. You can move with them. Some Marines, like the Scouts, they have a special action they can do. So you just have to decide, what am I going to do with those folks? Well, if you want to attack, this is the nice thing about combat for the Marines. Their weaponry has unlimited range, so you don't have to worry about counting distance, but you have to worry about blocking terrain, like the mountains will block line of sight. So as long as they can see the target, they can shoot. And the way they shoot is they have a combat value. That's how many dice they roll. So this Marine unit rolls 4 dice. They then also have 4 defense. So if they get attacked, that's the target number that needs to be rolled for them to take damage. They then have movement. And then some units have a JP, means a jump pack. So they can jump on their turn as part of their movement anywhere on the map. They just have to make a successful jump pack landing. So there's a chance that even jumping, they might mess up. So to do combat, they're going to fight a Colossi unit, for example. And we'll make a Colossi unit here just real fast. Here's some gray stones. All they got to do is, based on combat modifiers, like if they've moved or just landed in a turn, they look at their number, they're going to roll some dice and compare their dice results with the target number. If they score 1 or 2 hits, they chip the unit. Chipped is just a temporary status, so as soon as they no longer attack that Colossi, it goes away. But it subtracts 1 from the defense number, which is their shield. So that would mean the next Marine unit to attack that stack would get hits on a 2 or greater. If they score 3 or more hits, they then reduce that Colossi by 1 step. And if they score 3 more hits again, it removes that step from the Colossi. So it's now overall weaker. Alright, so that's the Marines in a nutshell. They can move the civilians, or they can combat, or do like a special action. Now there's some other Marine units that you can have access to. There's like a drill machine, there's some bombers. So you actually have quite a few options. And the Marines too, you have different types. So there's medics, there's headquarter units, There's a special ops unit with like a special drill machine. There's a headquarters unit that will help with scouting. You have recon, which can do a scout, which does a recon move, so you can see what chits are coming up in advance, so you can pick the better of two when you draw the event. You have medic, which helps heal. Alright, so you actually have quite a bit of diversity with the Marines. Now your Colossi, that's the thing you're fighting. They're like these sentient rock beings, and it's a colony. And each of these steps here pretty much represents like one colony that makes up a tribe, and they come in different strengths. So some might have 4, some might be 3 strong, some, like the redstone is huge, it's like 5. So obviously that's going to be much tougher to destroy. So at the beginning of the game, you randomly construct your Colossi unit, because each of these colonies, if that focuses, has its own strengths. So like for example, this part of the tribe has a 4 attack, 4 defense, and it has 2 special attacks. And if I randomly put it together, this part of the tribe, this colony here, has a 3 attack strength and a 4 defense. So you just randomly build these at the beginning of your game. So the way they fight is they have a path, kind of an AI path that they follow. So once your Marine is done, you check this here, which is Aura of our Ancestors. There's an event called Dust, which might fly up, which affects your ability to move and see on the game map. You then check if there's any gravel units that have been created through the game. Gravel is just another way to throw bad stuff at your group. These gravel pieces can get blown off of the Colossi. They can get blown off of buildings, and if you flip it during this aura, you have to pick one, or maybe an event might tell you to flip one, but now that has a special thing or ability or attack that gravel can now do, and it affects the game board. Then you move on to the Colossi that you've created, and it says draw a Colossi card. So you actually have a stack of cards. Whoops. And all you got to do is draw one, and that tells you the order in which your different colored Colossi move or activate. So not every scenario uses every single Colossi. So like the first scenario says you use the red and the blackstone tribes, and then it says pick 2 random ones. So I might have the black, the gray, red, and yellow, for example. So I know in this order card my blackstone would go first, then the white, then the gray, then the brown. And if I didn't have gray or I didn't have brown, then I ignore that part of the card. That just means only the black and the white ones activate if I had those. Then this important part here, Tiebreaker. So in case you have 2 Marine units that are equal distance away, the Colossi stack will always move or attack this here. It's going to go for the highest number according to the Tiebreaker card. Alright, so let's translate that to the board. So right here, I just have these units laid out. This redstone unit is 1-2 away or 1-2 away, and it says go to the highest number hex. So 3-5-6 versus 3-4-3. So I know this stack is always going to move towards the highest hex, and then it attacks. So once a Colossi moves adjacent to a Marine or a civilian, it attacks, and it attacks the same way. You look at its strength, and that gives you your starting dice. Now it doesn't get a bonus for adjacent, but what it gets is another dice or combat factor for each additional chit in the stack. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this redstone unit is going to roll 7 dice to attack, and when it attacks a Marine unit, you look at the defense. So I'd have to roll 7 dice, and every 4 or higher does a point of damage, and you'd cycle through your states. So 1 hit is stunned, 2 hits is paralyzed. The 3rd hit would leave you paralyzed, and you're going to be disrupted. Now it stacks, so let's say you healed once and you have a disrupted unit and it's stunned, and if it took another point of damage, it would then become paralyzed and disrupted. But once you're in a paralyzed and disrupted state and you take another point of damage, you're then eliminated. So recovery is very important. Now the thing here to remember though is you have on your stats, when you're stunned, you can't move. If you're stunned, you get -1 to your combat. But if you're paralyzed, that's even worse because you can't move and your combat factor is 0. So having paralyzed units is deadly for the Marines. So you always want to make sure that you're moving your Marines to keep distance from the Colossi because they are very, very strong when they attack. Now, in addition to their regular attack, they have special attacks. So this one here, MS, is a Medusa Stare, and then they also have this PT, or PE, it's like a pumice eruption. It shoots off gravel, which is bad because gravel, we learned, can turn into something worse. And then each tribe has on, slightly different special attacks. So after you do this, your regular attack, every tribe will then execute special attacks if they have qualifying targets. So that makes the Colossi very, very dangerous. So after you've activated all your Colossi and your Colossi have attacked, then you go to the end phase, which is where you just remove all the unnecessary markers. So there might be a marker that you place down that you don't need anymore. Sometimes, like the chip, let's say you forgot to pull the chipped marker off, you could remove that. The markers that do stay, though, would be paralyzed and stunned, because those have to be removed in the recovery phase. And then again, as you play, you might be able to activate certain special equipment. And that's pretty much the game in a nutshell. So if you want to see this played out in an example, like I said, just go look back on the channel and you'll see a gameplay example of like turns 1 and 2 with an explanation of rules and how all these pieces fit together. But I hope this gives you kind of an encapsulated view of how the game works. And if you have any further questions, just go ahead, leave that in the comments. But I hope that this gets you ready to play one of your first games. Thanks. Bye.